distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, fellow Sherpas. I like this format where we all work for our dinner. Welcome to the Shangri-La Dialogue Sherpa meeting 2018. It's a very nice, cozy room. The purpose of this meeting is to shape the agenda of the Shangri-La Dialogue later this year. Well, through the series of plenary sessions in the next few days, we hope to build a common understanding of the regional security landscape, key challenges we face, the threats we face, and the responses pursued by various countries. Then these fit into the Shangri-La discussions later in June. So I hope today's sessions have provided opportunities for you to achieve that. And tonight, let me sketch for you, for further consideration, some of the key security threats the world faces today. Now, we all know over the last few decades, the Asia-Pacific region has experienced economic growth, prosperity, progress, and development. And this has been made possible by the relative peace and stability that we have enjoyed in the region. And notwithstanding, significant security challenges remain. And tonight I'll touch on 4. And first, what we are familiar with, the developments in the Korean Peninsula. The situation continues to pose a conventional threat to regional stability. In recent weeks, we have seen a slight thawing in the Republic of Korea, or ROK, and Democratic People's Republic of Korea, or DPRK, and their relationship through the resumption of diplomatic discussions. It is the first in over 2 years. The DPRK's participation in the Winter Olympics is a welcome move in international engagement. And I read the headlines. The minister from ROK said that this could well be a turning point, and we all hope that it's a turning point. It also shows that within the DPRK regime, there is a desire for the DPRK to become an accepted member of the international community. However, this has happened against the backdrop of a tumultuous year marked by escalating rhetoric and the DPRK's provocative actions. As Minister Song mentioned during his keynote address this morning, the ballistic missile and nuclear tests conducted by DPRK in 2017 have affected the peace and stability of the peninsula and destabilized the global security equilibrium. How will the situation play out in the coming years? I think there's a spectrum of plausible scenarios. Given its catastrophic consequences, let me put aside all-out war as a possibility and talk about the other possibilities. One is a benign scenario. Under the pressure of sanctions imposed by the international community, the DPRK may agree to unravel its nuclear weapons program in exchange for some form of regime recognition, reversal of sanctions, and other economic concessions. The DPRK may then gradually develop economic linkages with the rest of the world, open up its economy, gravitate towards normality. But many will regard this as a highly unlikely scenario for a regime which regards its survival as resting on its accessibility to nuclear weapons. As President Putin puts it, DPRK rather eat grass than give up nuclear weapons. 2, the second scenario is the escalating rhetoric between parties concerned will lead to an impasse in negotiations, if they start at all. This would allow the DPRK time to continue steadily improving the range, accuracy, and explosive yield of its weapons. Within a year or two, it would have successfully miniaturized nuclear warheads, mastered re-entry technology, and developed the capabilities to launch a credible intercontinental nuclear attack. This will trigger a regional arms race that we don't want to see, and a very worrying situation. The peace and stability of the region will then rest just on the assurance of mutual destruction by the parties involved. And if we are lucky, we may get some denouncements of first use. However, reliance on what General McMaster called the classic theory of deterrence is scant comfort for the world. In reality, the situation is likely to approximate a third scenario where the trajectory of developments is not so clear-cut. The parties involved in the situation are likely to oscillate between the extremities I just painted. And perhaps with time, the options will narrow for all parties involved, leaving diplomatic talks as the only common viable path. This is overall an uncertainty that all countries in the region will have to live with and to manage. Now, the second threat is terrorism. It continues to be one of the region's most serious preoccupations. The Philippine Armed Forces only recently ended their 5-month-long battle against ISIS-linked militants who had taken over and occupied the southern city of Marawi. The focus is now on allowing displaced evacuees to return, rebuilding the city from the rubble, and reviving the economy, the local economy, and the industries. However, it would be foolish to believe that this victory has snuffed out terrorism in our region. The Marawi siege was symptomatic of more fundamental issues that continue to persist. The increasing prevalence of a strand of exclusive and austere Islam that rejects the modern world as we know it, the stratification of societies along racial and religious lines, and religious intolerance, which has facilitated the spread of radical ideology. Ironically, religious extremism will continue to spread through the online medium, which is probably the most important human technological breakthrough in recent decades, and the symbol and hope and opportunity for modern humanity. With the Syrian and Iraqi government having declared victory over the Islamic State in November 2017, the threat of returning fighters has grown sharply. As terrorist cells in the Middle East disband and these fighters return to their home countries, they will bring their connections, as well as their tactics and expertise in chemical, biological, and radioactive warfare. We expect terrorist groups to operate with increasing coordination and sophistication, with their operations and linkages spanning across national borders. For instance, the pro-IS militants who had launched the Marawi siege were believed to have enjoyed the support of pro-ISIS cells and individuals in the region, including from Malaysia and Indonesia. In addition, groups have been using more sophisticated technology like encrypted communication platforms and cryptocurrencies to evade detection. That's terrorism threat. The third threat is fake news, or deliberate online misinformation and falsehoods. These are increasingly undermining our social fabric and national unity. Such falsehoods are being deliberately spread online to attack public institutions, exploit society fault lines to sow discord, even interfering in national elections. This is not about messages which resonate with people going viral on its own, but malicious falsehoods deliberately planted and spread to troll farms and automated bots, capitalizing on the echo chamber effect of social media to amplify their impact. The techniques used are sophisticated to give the illusion of public interest, legitimacy, and support for the falsehoods and influencing public opinion. In November 2017, the New York Times published an article titled, "Terrorism is Faster Than Twitter," which mentioned how quickly ISIS-related accounts were revived after Twitter had deleted them. Let me quote a passage from the article. I quote, "One such account from a member who goes by Aswati Media taunts Twitter by boasting of the number of times it has regenerated after being shut down, 600 times in this case. A recent iteration of the Aswati account, which Twitter suspended in less than 24 hours, received 700,000 impressions," unquote. Propaganda has never been this powerful and automated. The only difference is that it is now used, including by foreign players, against national institutions. Today, tech giants such as Facebook and Twitter are being criticized for undermining democracy and have come under increasing public and regulatory pressures. Democracy was designed to enable different views and aspirations to coexist and seek a stable compromise for societies. The system, however, is founded on the ability of people to access reliable information to facilitate the public discourse and enable different views to coexist or even converge over time. Today, media, as we know, has been hijacked by something much more unpredictable and volatile, even vicious. The fundamental condition for democracy has been weakened. Society will fight back to restore our democratic institutions. This will be done through regulation, a likely drastic reconfiguration of the media industry, and an evolution of society to become more discerning of what's real and what's false and malicious. This is not conventional warfare, but battle within all our societies. But it has important implications for global stability, as dysfunctional domestic politics created by misinformation and falsehoods means messy external relations too. The fourth threat is the retreat of globalization and increase in protectionist tendencies, and these are longer threats to our economic progress and security. Globalization and interconnectedness have brought about economic progress, opportunities, and growth. But these benefits are not immediately obvious to the general population in many countries, who may continue to suffer joblessness, stagnant wages, environmental degradation, widening social disparity. These are the seeds of anti-globalization sentiments that give rise to nativist and protectionist policies. Having said that, the trajectory of globalization has never been straightforward in human history. Colonization was crude, unjust, and the backlash obvious. The Industrial Revolution led to the rise of Marxism, communism, and the Cold War. Each progress made by the WTO in the past has been met with protests and calls for protection of domestic trade. Globalization has always been 2 steps forward, 1 step back, because of its inherent pros and cons and its double-edged nature. But overall, we must understand that globalization leads to greater interdependence of nations, which means greater global security. However, if the process is not managed well, or its benefits confined to an elite few, then the discontents of globalization and its agenda will lose steam. So for the world to be a safer place, the global community of nations will always look towards the big powers, hoping that they will continue to manage their domestic politics well, be the bastions of international order, and champions of human progress and modernity through multilateral cooperation and globalization. These are some of the multifaceted changes we have to confront in our collective quest for peace, stability, and prosperity. What can we do about it? On the domestic level, every nation today needs an expanded toolkit of solutions in response to security challenges. Solutions that go beyond having effective military defenses. Because increasingly, enemies are non-state players, contentions are not cross-border, weapons are not military, conflicts will be unconventional and non-kinetic, and if armed conflicts do break out, they are likely to be urban and not rural. More likely, our enemies will agitate and inflict damage just below the threshold of triggering an all-out war. In this era, psychological defense becomes, we think, the most important prong of peacetime defense. It is about the ability of people to trust each other, have faith in societal and government institutions, provided they are not corrupt, and resilient to forces aimed at sowing discord and creating fissures in society. I was in Finland just last week, where the country just celebrated 100 years of independence. The Finns are strongly banded together as a people, distinct in their culture and their language, and share that collective sense of self-determination, having secured independence twice in their history. Today, the Finns can, I didn't know that, they can look up each other's income tax returns online. So it's totally public, and they're okay with that. The quantum of traffic fines is proportionate to your income. So you get a speeding ticket, the traffic police check your income, multiply by a certain percentage, and that's your fine. And the Finns accept that. I can't imagine Singapore doing that. But there are no major cries for privacy protection or against unfairness of traffic fines, not as far as I know. It is a well-established social compact which forms the bedrock of social cohesion and psychological resilience of a people. It is a cultural ballast, arguably stronger than military defense. In the short term, nations around the world increasingly recognize the need for legislation and regulatory safeguards to combat malicious online falsehoods. Germany enacted the Network Enforcement Act, which puts a legal obligation on large social networks to take down illegal content, such as hate speech. In the US, senators have proposed the Honest Ads Act, which requires those who take out political advertisements to disclose who funded the advertisements. France intends to introduce emergency powers to allow judges to remove content, close user accounts, or block websites that publish false information during sensitive times, such as an election. Indonesia recently launched a new cybersecurity agency to tackle online religious extremism, online terrorist networks, and fake news. In Singapore, we continue to place strong emphasis to preserve and enlarge the common space among Singaporeans of different ethnic and religious backgrounds. In the face of religious extremism, the leaders of all major religions in Singapore have taken active measures to stem the spread of extreme ideologies. The government has recently released a green paper to highlight the threat of deliberate online falsehoods. It has set up a parliamentary select committee to solicit views from the public and recommend solutions. We are stepping up our efforts to train servicemen in conducting urban battles and building up our cyber defense capabilities. That's domestic responses. Another set of responses is at the regional level. Through intra- and inter-regional cooperation, we must keep in check the trends of protectionism and nativism. ASEAN continues to push ahead with its economic integration agenda. For instance, the ASEAN Economic Community, or AEC, was established in 2015 to promote the free flow of goods, services, labor, and capital across ASEAN countries, and it continues to be guided by its 2025 blueprint. Major powers within the region have also taken the initiative to promote economic interdependence. The Belt and Road Initiative is China's effort to promote regional integration and engage more fully with the global economy. China has a real and legitimate interest to improve lives of its vast population and secure resources for its growth in the long term. The BRI represents China's worldview on how it intends to achieve its national priorities in this era, but it will work within the international order, catalyze needed infrastructural developments in the region by raising funds in the capital markets, entering into contracts, and through bilateral and regional cooperation. It will also promote trade and investments based on international rules and liberalization of those rules. It will work with all countries. As President Xi said in Davos last year, the countries, big or small, strong or weak, rich or poor, are all equal members of the international community. In a separate development, the remaining 11 members of the Trans-Pacific Partnership, or TPP agreement, have decided to keep up the momentum of trade liberalization and are making good progress to finalize the TPP 11 agreement. This agreement cannot be as significant as when US was a signatory, but it is a strong statement of intent from significant economies, including Japan, Mexico, Canada, Malaysia, and Vietnam. Concurrently, the negotiations of the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, or RCEP, are progressing well. Trade experts will know that it is not possible for such a vast free trade agreement to be as ambitious as certain bilateral or smaller regional FTAs. But it is without a doubt that this is a historical and momentous first step in drawing closer the economies of ASEAN, China, India, other Northeast Asia, and oceanic countries. Beyond participation in economic integration and free trade initiatives, it is important for ASEAN to remain relevant and constructive in contributing to global peace and stability. ASEAN's contribution is not in trying to be a regional power, but by maintaining its neutrality and centrality to keep the regional security architecture open and inclusive and providing a natural platform for major powers to engage each other. Every ASEAN chair over the years understands this. Hence, since ASEAN's formation in 1967, we have not only achieved great success in maintaining peace and stability in the region, but convened regional fora such as ASEAN Plus 3, ASEAN Regional Forum, and, of course, the ADMM Plus. While ASEAN maintains its neutrality and centrality, where it matters, ASEAN will take a common stance. One example of this was our joint support for the Philippines in its battle against terrorists in Marawi, our joint offer of various forms of assistance to the Philippines government, and our joint statement expressing concerns on the situation in the Korean Peninsula. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight I've spoken about the numerous challenges facing our region with very few solutions. While these threats appear daunting, no country is alone in this endeavor. Our shared interests and interconnectedness mean that our strongest ammunition is our solidarity and unity in cooperating with one another to ensure the overall peace and stability of the region. I wish you a successful and good conference. Thank you very much.